The storm brought Luke what seemed to be a helpless puppy, but as the thunder faded and days passed, he began noticing things no dog owner had seen before. The way it studied him with calculating eyes, how it moved through his house with military precision. The strange sounds it made at midnight that sent shivers down his spine. By the time Luke realized what he'd actually rescued that rainy night, it was too late. His act of kindness had already entangled him with one of nature's most cunning predators. This is a story about how an ordinary moment of compassion led one man into an extraordinary discovery that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the creatures that share our world. Please subscribe before we start this incredible story of courage, trust, and a mother's love that crossed the boundaries between species. This is the remarkable true story of how an unlikely partnership between soldiers and a bear led to one of the most extraordinary rescue missions ever documented. Rain poured heavily that Friday evening, turning Luke's usual walk from his car to his front door into a mad dash. Using his jacket to shield himself from the downpour, he rushed across his front yard, keys already in hand. But halfway to his door, a sound stopped him in his tracks. Through the drumming of rain, he heard a whimper. Luke stood still, water now running down his face. The sound came again, weaker this time, from somewhere near the bushes at the edge of his property. He turned his phone's flashlight on and walked toward the noise, his shoes sinking into the wet grass. There, huddled beneath a large rhododendron bush, lay a small, trembling creature. Its fur was dark and matted from the rain, and it shivered, uncontrollably. When Luke's light fell on it, the animal raised its head slightly, revealing scared eyes that seemed to plead for help. The creature looked like a puppy, perhaps a few months old, though its breed wasn't clear in the darkness, and rain. Luke's heart melted at the sight. He had always wanted a dog but never found the right time to get one. Now, it seemed, fate had brought one to his doorstep. Speaking softly to avoid frightening it, Luke crouched down near the bush. The rain had soaked through his clothes, but he barely noticed. The small animal watched him carefully, neither backing away nor approaching. Its behavior seemed odd for a puppy. There was no tail wagging, no excited movement, just an intense, almost calculating stare. Luke reached out slowly, expecting the creature to either retreat deeper into the bush or bound forward like an excited puppy. Instead, it did something unusual. It studied his hand for a long moment, tilted its head as if making a decision, then deliberately moved toward him with careful, measured steps. Once the animal was close enough, Luke gently picked it up. Though it was small, its weight felt different from what he expected, denser somehow. He wrapped it in his already wet jacket and hurried inside, where the warmth of his house and the soft jazz music he always played for his plants welcomed them. In the light of his living room, Luke got his first proper look at his new companion. While definitely puppy-sized, something about its features seemed slightly off. Its ears were an unusual shape, and its coat, even wet, showed strange patterns he couldn't quite place. But in his excitement to help the small creature, Luke dismissed these thoughts. After all, what else could it be but a lost puppy? Setting the creature down on a soft towel near the fireplace, Luke began gently drying its fur. The animal stayed, unusually still during this process, watching him with those strange, alert eyes. As he worked the towel carefully around its face and ears, more unusual features became clear. The snout was slightly longer than a typical puppy's, and there was something odd about the way its teeth showed when it opened its mouth. The jazz music playing in the background seemed to catch the creature's attention. Its ears twitched with each change in rhythm, moving in ways that seemed too controlled, too precise for a young dog. When Luke went to his kitchen to prepare some warm milk and leftover chicken, he noticed his new guest didn't follow him around, like an eager puppy would. Instead, it stayed by the fireplace, but he could feel its gaze tracking his every movement. That first night, Luke made a comfortable bed for the creature using old blankets in a corner of his living room. But when he woke up the next morning, he found the blankets untouched. Instead, the animal had positioned itself near his front window, sitting perfectly still, studying the street outside with an intensity that seemed far too focused for a puppy. Throughout that Saturday morning, more oddities emerged. The creature showed no interest in the squeaky toy Luke bought from the nearby pet store. It ignored the tennis ball he rolled across the floor. When the neighbor's friendly Labrador barked from the next yard, instead of barking back or showing curiosity, Luke's new companion let out a low, unfamiliar sound that made the Labrador whimper and retreat. During breakfast, Luke noticed how the creature ate. Unlike the messy, enthusiastic eating he expected from a puppy, it consumed its food with careful, calculated bites. Its movements were deliberate, almost graceful, as if following a pattern learned over generations. When it drank water, its tongue moved in a way that seemed different from any dog Luke had seen before. As morning turned to afternoon, Luke found himself increasingly puzzled by his new pet's behavior. It would pace the length of his living room in precise measured steps, always the same number, always in the same pattern. When the mail carrier approached the house, instead of barking excitedly like most dogs would, it pressed itself against the wall, becoming almost invisible in the shadows, its eyes never leaving the front door. Luke decided to name it Storm, inspired by the weather that had brought them together. But as he watched Storm's increasingly peculiar behavior, a nagging feeling grew in his stomach. Something wasn't quite right about this animal, and he needed answers. That evening, Luke settled on his couch with his laptop, Storm's strange behaviors weighing on his mind. He began searching online for different puppy breeds, hoping to identify what kind of dog Storm might be. But none of the images matched Storm's unique features, those unusually sharp teeth, the distinctive way it moved, and those eyes that seemed to hold secrets. As night fell, Storm's behavior became even more unsettling. Instead of settling down to sleep, it grew more alert. The creature positioned itself at the foot of Luke's bed, ears constantly moving, tracking sounds that Luke couldn't hear. The most disturbing part came around midnight, when Storm let out a series of low, mournful sounds that were nothing like a dog's bark or whine. These vocalizations seemed to come from deep within, carrying echoes of something wild and ancient. Unable to sleep, Luke started a blog post about his mysterious new pet. As a software developer who usually wrote about coding and weekend hiking adventures, this was different territory. He titled the post, "My Puppy Might Not Be a Puppy," and described everything he had observed. Within hours, comments began flooding in. Some readers suggested exotic dog breeds, while others proposed more unusual theories. A few even mentioned wild animals, but Luke dismissed these ideas. After all, how could a wild animal end up in his suburban backyard? Monday morning arrived, with new concerns. Luke had to go to work, but leaving Storm alone didn't feel right. He set up his home security camera to keep an eye on his unusual pet while he was gone. Throughout the day, he checked the footage on his phone. What he saw made his unease grow stronger. Storm spent hours performing what looked like patrol routes through the house, moving with military precision. When the neighbor's cat appeared in the window, Storm's reaction was unlike anything Luke had seen before. A display of predatory focus that seemed more suited to a wild hunter than a domestic pet. By the time Luke returned home, he knew he needed professional help. Storm's behaviors were becoming more pronounced, more impossible to ignore. The way it studied its surroundings, the calculated movements, the unusual sounds at night, none of it fit with what he knew about dogs. He decided it was time to visit a veterinarian, not just for Storm's health, but to unravel the growing mystery of what exactly he had welcomed into his home. That night, as Luke made the appointment for the vet visit, Storm watched him from across the room. In the dim light, its eyes seemed to glow with an intelligence that sent shivers down Luke's spine. For the first time since that rainy night, he wondered if his act of kindness had led him into something far more extraordinary than he could have imagined. Luke managed to schedule an appointment with Dr. Sophia Ellis, a highly recommended veterinarian, at the local clinic. However, when they arrived on Wednesday morning, the receptionist informed him that Dr. Ellis had been called away for a family emergency. The only option was to come back next week to see Dr. Peterson, the replacement vet. During the drive home, Luke noticed something odd in his rearview mirror. Storm, who had been unusually calm during the car ride, seemed almost relieved that they were returning without seeing the vet. Those strange eyes kept meeting Luke's in the mirror, holding an expression that appeared almost knowing. Back at home, Storm's peculiar behaviors intensified. That afternoon, Luke watched in amazement as the creature calculated a precise leap from the floor to a high shelf, a jump that seemed impossible for its size. When a delivery person approached the house, Storm didn't bark, but instead melted into the shadows of the living room, becoming nearly invisible, only its reflective eyes giving away its position. The online community following Luke's blog posts grew larger each day. His latest update about Storm's impossible jump drew attention from animal behaviorists and wildlife experts. Comments flooded in with theories ranging from rare genetic mutations to more outlandish explanations. One comment particularly caught Luke's attention, a wildlife researcher who noted that Storm's behaviors resembled those of wild predators rather than domestic animals. At night, the mystery deepened. Luke woke to find Storm standing at his bedroom window completely motionless, staring at the moon. The creature's silhouette looked different somehow, its features more pronounced, less dog-like in the moonlight. When it turned to look at him, its eyes reflected the moonlight in a way that no dog's eyes should. The week dragged on, filled with more unexplainable incidents. Storm began responding to complex patterns in Luke's behavior, anticipating his actions before he made them. It showed an uncanny ability to open closed doors, not by pawing at them, but by calculating the exact pressure needed to turn the handles. Most disturbing was its reaction to watching nature documentaries on TV. It paid attention only to segments about large predators, studying them with an intensity that made Luke increasingly uneasy. Finally, the day of the appointment with Dr. Peterson arrived. As Luke prepared to leave, Storm's demeanor changed dramatically. The creature that had been so calculating and controlled suddenly became agitated, pacing in irregular patterns, its careful composure cracking for the first time since Luke had found it. The veterinary clinic buzzed with typical morning activity when Luke and Storm arrived. In the waiting room, a Labrador with a limp rested near its owner, while a cat hissed softly from inside its carrier. The scene shifted dramatically upon their entrance. Other animals grew strangely quiet, with the Labrador backing away despite its injury, and the hissing cat falling into sudden silence. The change rippled through the human occupants as well. Worried glances passed between pet owners, with hushed whispers and subtle pointing toward Storm. Even the receptionist's professional composure wavered upon seeing Luke's unusual pet. Storm remained unnaturally still throughout this reaction, scanning the room with that unsettling intelligence that had become so familiar to Luke. Their turn to see the vet marked a turning point in Storm's behavior. The creature's entire demeanor shifted as they approached the examination room. Muscles tensed beneath its unusual coat, and in a burst of unexpected strength, Storm broke free from its leash. Chaos erupted throughout the waiting room. The Labrador's frantic barking mixed with the cat's renewed screeching, while startled children added to the commotion as Storm darted between chairs and frightened patients. The clinic's veterinary assistant, moving with quick efficiency, joined Luke in pursuing Storm through the building. Their chase ended in a storage room filled with medical supplies where they finally cornered the creature. Storm's panic showed clearly now, with heavy breathing and wide eyes, but something else emerged in those moments. A wild, primitive instinct that seemed entirely out of place in the sterile clinic environment. Dr. Peterson's examination revealed the truth piece by piece. His experienced hands moved over Storm's form with growing bewilderment, each observation adding to his mounting suspicion. The professional calm in his movements gave way to genuine amazement as he discovered one unusual feature after another. The examination of Storm's teeth proved to be the final piece of evidence, causing him to step back with the weight of his realization. Multiple consultations of medical texts and hurried phone calls followed, each confirming what the examination had revealed. The truth emerged with stunning clarity. The creature Luke had rescued that rainy night, the animal he had welcomed into his home, was no lost puppy. In his care, sharing his living space, and watching him with those intelligent eyes, had been a young spotted hyena. The room fell into heavy silence as the reality of Dr. Peterson's discovery sank in. Every peculiar behavior Luke had witnessed over the past week suddenly aligned with perfect clarity. The calculated movements through his house, the unsettling night sounds, the precise hunting instincts, all belonged not to a stray puppy, but to one of Africa's most skilled predators. Dr. Peterson's actions took on a new urgency. His swift movements around the examination room reflected years of veterinary experience confronting an unprecedented situation. Notes were taken, wildlife authorities were notified, and plans for proper containment began taking shape. A specialized facility would need to be contacted, one equipped to handle exotic wildlife of this caliber. Luke's mind raced through memories of the past week. The way Storm had watched his evening routines, how it had patrolled his house with military precision, its unusual reaction to the nature documentaries. Each memory now carried new weight. He had shared his home with a creature designed by nature for the African savanna, not the quiet suburbs of his neighborhood. In the controlled chaos that followed, a temporary enclosure was prepared for Storm. The young hyena seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere, its posture changing subtly. Those same eyes that had studied Luke across his living room now held a wild power that seemed impossible to have missed. The creature's true nature had been there all along, hidden beneath a thin veil of domesticity that was now permanently lifted. The morning stretched into afternoon as wildlife experts were consulted and arrangements made. Storm's presence in suburban America raised countless questions about how such a creature could have ended up in Luke's backyard that stormy night. Each theory seemed more unlikely than the last, yet the evidence stood before them, watching with those intelligent eyes that had captivated Luke from the start. Through the clinic's windows, the afternoon light began to fade as wildlife authorities arrived. Their specialized transport vehicle pulled into the parking lot with quiet efficiency. These experts moved with practiced precision, their presence bringing a sense of order to the extraordinary situation. Their faces showed neither shock nor alarm at finding a young hyena in a suburban veterinary clinic. They had clearly handled unusual cases before, though perhaps none quite like this. The head wildlife expert examined Storm with professional interest, noting characteristics that spoke of the creature's remarkable journey. Despite being far from its natural habitat, the young hyena had shown incredible adaptation skills. Its coat, though different from typical hyena markings, suggested it had already begun adjusting to a cooler climate. The expert's assessment confirmed what Luke had observed. This was no ordinary wild animal, but one of exceptional intelligence and adaptability. As the experts prepared for Storm's transfer, they shared insights about spotted hyenas that hit Luke with waves of recognition. Their complex social structures, high intelligence, and strong familial bonds explained so much about Storm's behavior in his home. The way it had observed his routines, its careful interactions with household objects, its measured responses to new situations, all were hallmarks of a species known for its remarkable cognitive abilities. The time for transition arrived with gentle inevitability. A specialized transport cage was brought in, designed to ensure both Storm's comfort and security during the journey to a wildlife sanctuary. The young hyena would be taken to a facility equipped to handle exotic wildlife, staffed by experts, who could provide proper care while trying to unravel the mystery of its appearance in suburban America. In these final moments at the clinic, Storm's behavior shifted yet again. The panic from earlier had subsided, replaced by a calm alertness that seemed to acknowledge the changing circumstances. Those intelligent eyes moved between the wildlife experts and Luke, as if understanding that a significant transition was underway. These final moments carried a weight that Luke hadn't expected. As the wildlife experts prepared Storm for transport, memories of the past week flooded back. Each peculiar incident now held new meaning. The careful way Storm had explored his house, those moonlit watches by the window, the impossible leaps that had amazed his blog followers. A creature from the African plains had briefly shared his ordinary suburban life, turning it into something extraordinary. The wildlife sanctuary they had chosen lay a few hours north, nestled in a secluded area that offered both security and space for animals requiring specialized care. The facility's reputation for handling unusual cases made it the perfect choice for Storm's unique situation. Here, experts could study Storm's remarkable adaptations while providing the proper environment for a young hyena's needs. As sunset approached, the time for goodbyes drew near. The transfer cage had been prepared with careful attention to comfort, lined with familiar blankets from Luke's home. Storm entered without resistance, maintaining that same calculating composure that had marked their entire strange journey together. In these last moments, the young hyena's behavior reflected neither distress nor wild aggression, but rather that same mysterious intelligence that had first caught Luke's attention in the rain. Standing in the clinic's parking lot, watching the transport vehicle disappear into the growing dusk, Luke felt the weight of the week's events settle around him. His simple act of kindness on a rainy night had led him into an adventure he could never have imagined. His quiet suburban life had briefly intersected with something wild and mysterious, leaving him with a story that would stay with him forever. The following days brought a flood of interest from wildlife researchers and experts across the country. Luke's blog posts about Storm gained attention from scientific communities interested in studying how a young hyena had survived and adapted so well to suburban life. But for Luke, the most remarkable part wasn't the scientific mystery. It was the reminder that the world still held wonders capable of appearing on ordinary doorsteps on rainy nights. The wildlife sanctuary sent regular updates about Storm's adjustment to its new environment. The young hyena had seamlessly integrated into the facility's specialized care program, continuing to display the remarkable intelligence that had captivated Luke. In the proper environment, Storm's true nature flourished even more, showing hunting instincts and social behaviors that belonged in the wild, not in a suburban home. Luke's life gradually returned to its usual rhythm of work, weekend hikes, and evening jazz music. Yet something had fundamentally changed. His encounter with Storm had opened his eyes to the thin line between the ordinary and extraordinary. His blog, once focused on coding projects and local hiking trails, now attracted a curious mix of wildlife enthusiasts and scientists, all drawn to the story of a mysterious creature that had briefly bridged two worlds. Experts never fully explained how a young spotted hyena had ended up in suburban America that stormy night. Theories ranged from illegal exotic pet trade escapees to more unlikely scenarios, but the truth remained as elusive as Storm's origins. The local zoo even created an educational program inspired by the incident, teaching children about the importance of proper wildlife identification and the complexities of human-animal interactions. On quiet evenings, when rain fell outside his window, Luke often found himself thinking about those strange days with Storm. The incident had taught him that mystery and wonder could appear in the most unexpected places, even in a suburban backyard during a storm. His simple act of compassion had led him into an adventure that challenged everything he thought he knew about the creatures that shared our world. The story of the puppy that wasn't a puppy became part of local legend, shared at community gatherings and retold with varying degrees of embellishment. But Luke knew the real story, about intelligent eyes watching him from the shadows, impossible leaps in the moonlight, and the remarkable week when his ordinary life had brushed against something truly extraordinary. In the end, Luke's experience with Storm served as a reminder that sometimes the most amazing discoveries come not from seeking adventure, but from simple acts of kindness on rainy nights. The world, he had learned, was full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered, even in the most ordinary places. Life settled back into its rhythm, but Luke's perspective had forever changed. Each time he heard an unusual sound in the night, or caught a glimpse of movement in his backyard, he remembered those intelligent eyes that had taught him how extraordinary an ordinary act of kindness could become. Storm's story lived on, not just in the wildlife sanctuary's records or his popular blog posts, but as a reminder that sometimes the most amazing discoveries happen when we least expect them. Did you enjoy this tale of an unexpected encounter? Share your thoughts in the comments below about what you would have done if you had found Storm that rainy night. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more extraordinary stories that blur the line between ordinary life and amazing discovery. Until next time, keep your eyes open. You never know what mysteries might be waiting in your own backyard. Together, we can ensure more stories like this have happy endings. Subscribe, share, and be the voice for those who can't speak for themselves.